SosKaid let out a slow breath, the cooling evening air beginning to crystallize in a long expanding cone in front of her. The trap was set. A lot had to go right in order for this plan to pay off, but it was the best that they'd got. She turned to Hawthorne's shadowy shape, barely visible behind a tree nearby. The bob of the silhouetted head, a confirmation. She took another deep breath, this time resting her left hand on the rough but crumbling tree bark of the arboreal skeleton in front of her and propped the cool matte metal barrel of her hunting rifle on it. SosKaid noted with satisfaction the barely perceptible glow of the moonlight on the dulled metal. Thanks, Saya, she thought to herself as she sighted down the barrel at the huge, spiked raider sitting stoically by the campfire. Ramirez was chatting away at the side of the leader's cold face like a kid trying to fit in. She slowly released her breath again and could have sworn she felt the nearby Hawthorne brace herself. At the zenith of her outbreath, she felt surprisingly calm and in control. She blinked once and pulled the trigger.
Hello, everybody. How y'all? Get your dancing shoes on, and welcome to the Camel Rock and Roll Dance Party.
Hello and welcome back to A Wasteland Story, the show where I, PJ, play alone in the sandbox post-apocalyptic world that is Fallout, following the story of SosKaid and her good boy companion Dogmeat as they attempt to right a few wrongs. Doesn't matter. And survive in the process. In the last episode of the show, SosKaid found herself a prisoner again alongside the very person she was trying to save, tied up in the remains of a creepy drive-in cinema screen at the mercy of a particularly sleazy raider. Will they escape? Will they track down their traitorous comrade before he leads the raiders to bring hell to the settlement of Keshar? Will anyone else die surprisingly purely because a pair of dice decided they were having a contemptuous day? Yeah. Let's see. SosKaid could feel Hawthorne shivering next to her, although it wasn't cold. She was extremely conscious of the sound of her heartbeat and ragged breathing. She kept her eyes to the floor, trying to get said breathing under control, trying to think. There was a bright red stain on the double padding of her right knee, and she became acutely aware of a piece of grit between her kneecap and the floor, but she didn't dare shift. The presence of the raider standing above them was like a dark cloud in her thoughts, and she didn't trust herself to look up until she'd collected them.
I'll be right back, little birds. Don't go anywhere.
She heard the thin metal door slam and bounce to her left, and the crunch of footsteps moving away. She took a deep breath around the stinking, oily rag that had been unceremoniously jammed between her teeth and looked up, taking in her surroundings for the first time.
Okay, back after a short break. Okay, so they get dragged into the, where the little camp was, in sort of the screen of this drive-in cinema screen. Let's see what it looks like in there, and see if there's anything in there that can get, that they can maybe use to their advantage. I want to look at some objects and just see the kinds of things that are in there. 39 is fragrant. 46 is heavy. So I think SosKaid and Hawthorne have never smelt anything so bad as this place. It's quite a small, narrow little space, and I think at least 5 raiders have been living in there for a little while. And so it absolutely stinks.
The smell hit her like a brick wall, sweat, shit and piss, and the rusty odour of blood. SosKaid swallowed what felt like her whole heart and stomach and let her eyes adjust to the dim, dank space. She focused, her heartbeat starting to slow to something below that of an overchoked generator. Okay, she thought as the clouding in her mind cleared slightly. We need a plan.
In terms of heavy, I think maybe it means they've been collecting stuff. I wonder what they're collecting. I think they're trying to build something to give them advantage to attack the Brotherhood of Steel there, maybe. Okay, let's first find this out. Why are they there? I'm going to ask Mythic for motivations. Character motivations. So I want to know why the Orn Dogs... Okay, are they the Orn Dogs? I'm just going to say yes. I think they are. Well, let's call it very likely that they're the Orn Dogs, because they're the two big factions in there. Does he belong to the Orn Dogs? Yes, they belong to the Orn Dogs. Good. So now their motivations for setting up camp in the cinema so close to the NCR and the Brotherhood outpost. That is adventure. How does adventure fit with them? Throw one spell. Control.
The entrance to the inside of the giant screen was on the leftmost side of the room, positioning SosKaid and Hawthorne with their backs to the majority of the space. The small space in front of them, however, appeared to make up the entirety of the gang's living area. She peered up into the looming, lofty space above and noted 8 makeshift hammocks strung up in a crisscross fashion, rising into the dusty glow of the extremely high ceiling. A rusted ladder was built into the frame of the screen and ran up out of sight past the dizziness-inducing sleeping arrangement. There was some shelving cobbled together in various spots up the frame with crates and junk perched on them. They looked pretty unstable. SosKaid shuffled around, cursing as the temporarily forgotten piece of grit caught a painful spot on her knee. She repositioned slightly so that she could see over her shoulder to the huge narrow space behind them.
So, I think something about the town of Springfield or this area is really important to everyone. It must be a really defensible location, maybe. And also, that's why the Brotherhood of Steel and the NCR are there as well. So there's something about this town or this area that makes it really valuable. What is it? Let's see where it is on the map. So the Orn Dogs and the Rent Boys are a good week to 2 weeks south of this place. There's something about it which is really valuable. Okay. I think what it is that Salem, which is a few days to the north, Salem must be a really important place. And so I think this is pretty much the last defensible spot before Salem. And the Raiders want to get into Salem for some reason. We're not sure why, what's there. The Brotherhood of Steel want to defend that because they're trying to extend their line all the way up the coast from Vancouver. So that's why I think they all want to be here. So they want to control this region so it was adventure and control. They want to be able to control this region so that they can push up into Salem. And Salem, I think, is probably completely overrun, and that's why no one's been able by something. That's why no one's been able to get in there. Maybe that's where the bigger super mutant FEV plot is. I'm not sure. Okay. So, we'll get to that.
Immediately behind the prisoners stood a chain-link fence and gate, locked with some kind of keypad. And beyond that she could make out a wall of racks that seemed to be bristling with presumably claimed weapons and ammunition. On the opposite side of the rack stood a number of half-constructed, rusted suits of power armour. A couple of T-45s, most of a 60, and even a few scraps of an X-01, she noticed. Her father had had an old military magazine listing all of the models, and as a kid she'd been obsessed with it. The X-01 wasn't even released at the time of printing. SosKaid had always assumed that it never made it to production. She remembered measuring herself against the kitchen doorway nearly every day after her father had told her he wanted to teach her how to operate his suit, a T-60, when she got tall enough. She was so frustrated with the slow progress that she'd tried hanging upside down on his chin-up bar holding a heavy mini generator at an attempt to stretch herself out. The pounding of the blood in her temples always forcing her down before long. They had definitely been busy, she thought, forgetting the danger they were in for just a second. They were preparing for something big. As her eyes adjusted further to the darkness, she saw the outline of a spray-painted tag on the wall over the suits of armour. Her stomach went cold as she made out the scrawled writing. Dogs. The fear enveloped her again, this time entangled with anger and hatred. She heard the crunch of the boots returning and she hurriedly returned her gaze to the ground facing the doorway. It swung open again with a bang.
For the meantime, SosKaid, I think the raider is going to pat down SosKaid and she's going to see if she can keep her knife concealed. That's going to be 9 plus 3 is 12. Difficulty 1. She does.
SosKaid flinched as the metal door clattered again. Their captor strolled through with SosKaid's backpack slung over one shoulder and her hunting rifle in hand. He threw it on the small table perched next to the doorway, disturbing some small glass vials that were strewn across its wonky surface. He started digging through the backpack. SosKaid risked a glance at Hawthorne and saw her eyes had seemed to go absent and glassy. The raider chuckled to himself as he pulled out the frag mines, set them on the table as well, and took a few strides over to his prisoners. Eyes still to the floor, SosKaid flinched as she felt the filthy fingernail under her chin. It lifted her head.
You don't have any more nasties on you, do you?
She went stiff as his left hand slid under her heavy coat, fingers crawling over her body, stopping for an endless moment on her right breast. SosKaid held back the urge to spit in the man's face. The fingers continued to feel around and stopped at the crinkle of her map tucked into her vault suit. They tickled her playfully. She felt sick. The raider slid the map out from the open front of her clothing and chuckled again.
Well, well, well,
the raider said.
What do we have here?
All thoughts of the rest of the body search apparently forgotten, for now. She felt the nub of her knife handle pushing into her thigh.
So she manages to keep her knife concealed. She's asked him if he's a rent boy. He said no, and she said, well, I've got some information that'll help you help the On Dogs get a advantage over the rent boys. Let's see if he believes her. That's going to be a check of 4. We will spend an action point for another one.
The raider knelt in front of her and began to study the map, tongue out of the side of his mouth clamped between his teeth in fierce concentration, his fetid breath hitting her face in little puffs. She saw his face change. His lopsided smile seemed to fall, his voice lower in pitch the next time he spoke. And how would a bird like you know the location of those fucking rent boys' stronghold? He reached up and roughly pulled SosKaid's gag down from her mouth. The smell seemed to intensify. I killed one of their captains, she said quietly. The raider's face changed back to its familiar grin.
No, you fucking didn't,
he chuckled after a moment's pause.
Not a little birdie like you.
SosKaid shifted her knees slightly on the ground. Look again in my bag, she continued. Right down the bottom, there's a pocket to the right-hand side. The raider looked at her, smiling for a moment before standing and returning to the bag. He dug around again and pulled out the small, ugly, bobble-headed replica ornament that she'd taken from the raider under the bridge and studied it closely in silence. She waited a beat and then said, I know more about their stronghold. She lied. I can help you get an advantage. After all, they are rivals of the great On Dogs, aren't they? He looked at her with mild interest, eyes flickering to the graffiti behind them. The silence drew itself out like an impossibly long splinter.
We do not get it. So she's not able to convince me. He says, yeah, whatever.
The raider burst into another bout of laughter.
You didn't kill a renter captain,
he said as he twisted an errant piece of wire on his mismatched armour around the neck of the small figure, pinning it to his chest like a half-assed brooch.
I did.
This, however, will go nicely on my armour to show that he's killed the things. And he starts doing a check around the perimeter, making sure there's no one else around before he starts having fun with the girls. I say fun. So he leaves them alone for 15 minutes while he does a check.
All of a sudden, there was the sound of angry growling and barking from outside and a single shot. The raider sighed.
Ah well, nothing like a bit of delayed satisfaction to get the juices running.
He picked up a pipe pistol that was scattered on the table amongst the glass vials with one hand and fished through the mess with the other, finding one with a small amount of viscous orange liquid. He clicked it into a handheld device he pulled from his pocket, put it in his mouth, and inhaled. There was a little hiss.
I'll be right back,
he said, breath held as he spoke. He absent-mindedly grabbed SosKaid's backpack and rifle as he turned on his heel and headed back out the door with a sickening wink. This was their chance. They had to act now.
So she says, I've got my knife, we need to get out of here and we need to take him down when he comes back in. SosKaid is really flexible and agile, so she's able to get her hands back under her legs, and she pulls the knife out and she manages to first cut the bonds of Hawthorne and then cut her own bonds.
Quick, hissed SosKaid, turn your back to me. Hawthorne obeyed and SosKaid squeezed the knife from her thigh with difficulty. She felt blindly for Hawthorne's bonds. Thankfully, while SosKaid's bonds were made of cutting twisted wire, the raiders had used rope to tie Hawthorne's hands. SosKaid felt for the proffered wrists behind her and rubbed the knife between them. As soon as she felt the bonds give, she dropped the knife and tucked her legs up and over her own arms, bringing them in front of her. Hawthorne scrambled for her own gag and went to untwisting the wire around SosKaid's wrists. They came free, and SosKaid quickly reached for the knife lying on the floor. Another shot fired and she heard a muted instruction to their captor.
Follow it up to the tree line. Make sure there's no one else creeping up. I'll cover you from here. I don't want any more interruptions.
The raider was smart enough not to leave weapons in there. He's got her weapons on him and her backpack on him, and he's doing a check. Their legs are also bound, so they're going to cut those things as well. So he wasn't very smart to leave them, but he didn't think he was going to be long. And they're just girls. What are they going to do? So I think they find something heavy in there. And I think because this is quite a vertical thing, there's kind of, wooden platforms and stuff built up in between the inside of this screen, which is, say, maybe 2 meters wide. And so I think she tells Hawthorne to get up high and to push that, whatever it is that's up there, something heavy. Let's say it's what would be inside?
SosKaid looked up into the hollow rise of the drive-in's interior. There, above the door, was some kind of old air conditioning unit hanging wonkily from an overstressed corner. Hawthorne followed her gaze and nodded, seeming to understand. Can you get up there? SosKaid said hastily. Hawthorne nodded and began to clamber up the footholds in the ancient wall. If you can't knock it down in time, you'll have to drop down on him while I come at him with my knife. All clear? She heard a voice shout from the outside. They were out of time. SosKaid hurriedly repositioned herself to where she'd been, hands back behind her back, but this time gripping her knife tightly. I can't see from up here, whispered Hawthorne, panic in her voice. Don't worry, replied SosKaid. Just push as hard as you can on my signal.
I mean, just some piece of machinery that they've collected. I'm not sure, but something heavy. She says, okay, so when he comes back, you're going to push that down on top of him, and then I'm going to get him with the knife. She says, are you ready? Hawthorne climbs up to the top, and she's ready to push thing, which will fall down to the doorway, and SosKaid starts shouting, all damsel in distress, help, help.
SosKaid saw Hawthorne switch abruptly into operation mode as she leapt lithely to the climbing rungs built into the frame of the huge cinema screen. SosKaid watched and tried to slow her breathing, clutching her knife behind her back. Hawthorne made it up to the hanging air conditioning unit and struggled to position her back against the wall, planting her feet firmly to the back of it. She gave an experimental push. The tortured bolt holding the heavy unit creaked. Ready, whispered SosKaid. Hawthorne gave a nod, and SosKaid drew a deep breath. She let out a blood-curdling scream, hoping to throw a bit of confusion into the mix when the raider re-entered the room. A couple of moments' hesitation could be all that we need. She tensed as she heard the footsteps crunch turn into a jog. She held Hawthorne's gaze for a moment before turning her focus back to the door, breath held once more.
And so this guy comes running back, and as he runs into the door, SosKaid says, now. Hawthorne is going to push. She's not very strong. But let's do a check on him if he can dodge it. So his agility is 6 and survival is 1. So he needs to get a 7 in order to dodge this thing.
The sound of the footsteps changed from a crunch to a metallic ring as the raider reached the screen's entrance. Now! Shouted SosKaid. Hawthorne heaved. A split second later, the thin metal door crashed open once more, and the raider was there, wild-eyed with SosKaid's hunting rifle in hand, pointing at the various corners of the room. Bitch! Was all the raider got out before a sad twisting sound brought the rusted block of metal down from above. The raider instinctively leapt forward, determined grimace on his face, and SosKaid heard another bark and a gunshot come from outside.
And he does not. In fact, he rolls a 20. So not only does this thing hit him as it falls down, but it actually, I think it hits him in the torso. And not only does it hit him and do some damage, I don't know, 4 damage out of his 8 hit points, but it also pins him to the ground. And he drops his out of reach of his gun. That was the complication.
The heavy air conditioning unit hit the man in his lower back as he leapt forward. There was a crunching sound as his spine gave way to the cruel, rusty weight of the metal box. He screamed. SosKaid heard more footsteps racing up to the door, and she rushed forward, deftly scooping up the rifle that was still sliding toward her. She stepped over the raider, dodging his weakly flailing arms, grabbing at her ankle as she did. SosKaid didn't hesitate. She lightly kicked the door open with her right foot as she brought the rifle to her eye. There was the zing as a bullet hit the door frame next to her. She didn't flinch. SosKaid watched the last raider as he ran towards her, swearing, trying to reload his pistol. He looked up at her, hatred in his eyes, before suddenly looking skyward as his head snapped back from the impact of her shot and fell, sliding forward in the dust on his heels before hitting the ground. There was an eerie silence pierced only by the slight ringing in SosKaid's ears. She turned and looked at the pathetic figure on the floor beside her. He was squirming. She stepped back inside, careful to crush the man's knuckle under her boot as she did.
So then they get up and they say, we're going to have our fun with you now, you bastard. And SosKaid holds her knife to his throat and she says, tell us about, give us some useful information.
Hawthorne had climbed down from her perch and was breathing heavily. SosKaid met her eyes and the scribe nodded. The man was whimpering like a child left in the dark. Please, he snuffled pathetically. I was never going to hurt you. I was just having a laugh. I'm a good guy, really. I can help you. SosKaid knelt in front of him and nodded to Hawthorne to check the man's body and what was visible of his legs for any hidden threat. A cascade of hot anger drove her fear into retreat and pushed her knife down swiftly through the back of the raider's left hand. It found some purchase on the floor below and stuck there with a satisfying thud. The man screamed and then began to sob again. You are going to help us, said SosKaid quietly, and then we're going to kill you.
Okay, does he cooperate and tell them anything? Yes, he does. So he cooperates and the tables have been turned. He's really not a big man when he doesn't have the girls tied up in front of him. And he explains that both raider clans are trying to get a stronghold on this place so that they can mount an assault on Salem. Why? What's in Salem that's so valuable? What's in Salem?
The raider explained that the Dogs had been pushing north and building up something of an army. They were setting up outposts like this one, raiding nearby settlements and collecting heavy weaponry and ammunition, as well as recruiting various non-aligned groups along the way, with the promise of fortune and the threat of death for non-compliance. Apparently, the Dogs were under the command of a fierce leader known as Bath Bloodright, who'd spent years building the largest cooperating band of raiders the Wasteland had ever seen, at least according to them.
Proceed. Elements. Proceed elements. Elements proceed. Water. Maybe Salem has a vault? I think Salem has a vault.
SosKaid listened carefully to the pathetic raider, making a few notes on her map, including the location of Salem and the apparent Vault 17. She tucked the map away again safely in her suit and turned back to the raider, wiping her knife clean on her sleeve and slotting it back into her leg-mounted sheath. She drew her pistol and clicked a bullet into the chamber with the pull of the well-oiled slide. "Get anything you need, Hawthorne, and meet me outside," SosKaid said, looking at their former captor. Hawthorne didn't argue and collected a few bits and pieces before walking briskly out, not looking back.
Salem has a vault, which they know about, and it has fresh water. I think it has maybe a water chip. And somehow they've found out about this. Maybe they've killed another vault dweller before, but I think there's an important vault in Salem.
SosKaid turned to look at the collection of weaponry locked away behind her. Most of it looked like she wouldn't even be able to carry it, let alone use it offensively. She thought for a moment, keeping the now silent raider in the corner of her eye. She could do with some ammunition, but if they wanted to track Ramirez, they really couldn't waste any time. Plus, they'd have to get in somehow, and apparently only the captain had the security code.
Okay, is the vault open? Extreme yes. So yes, so the vault has been opened, probably, but it's inaccessible because of whatever is infesting Salem. Maybe it's death claws, maybe it's super mutants, I'm not sure.
SosKaid sighed and turned around. "Were you at the village raid south of Newark?" she said quietly. The raider looked confused for a second and then comprehension dawned on his face. No, I wasn't there. I swear. Barth led that raid personally. None of us knew the details. We've just been following our instructions up here." SosKaid nodded sadly and raised her pistol, pulling the trigger before the man's expression had a chance to change to fear. The ring on the inside of the metal screen was deafening. There was a hollow sound of the casing bouncing on the floor, and then nothing. SosKaid holstered her pistol, slung her backpack and hunting rifle over her shoulder, and walked towards the door. She stopped and thought for a minute before turning back.
And SosKaid shoots him in the head.
Hawthorne was standing outside, Dogmeat with her, when SosKaid emerged from the drive-in a few minutes later. She had all of her gear and an extra duffel-type bag she'd apparently found inside. She dropped the bag next to Hawthorne, caught her eye and nodded before bending down to give Dogmeat a firm squeeze around the neck. The puppy wagged his tail manically and squirmed to get out of her grip before looking disappointed and attempting to squeeze his head back into the grip. SosKaid appeared not to have noticed, though, and was staring off into the middle distance. Hawthorne cleared her throat. "Are you okay?" she said, something catching as she did. "Yeah," said SosKaid emotionlessly. "You?" "Yeah," replied Hawthorne. After a few moments, she continued. "What's in the bag?"
What did he have on him? Road, leathers, pipe, gun, wealth 1. There was another raider we killed it there. So we're going to search the raiders. So we find 22 caps. So that's 106. And we're going to see what we can scavenge here. Scavenging. So I think this is... It's untouched because they've been set up in here. So it's a small single room. It's going to take 10 minutes. I think probably it's military because they've been setting it up as a bit of a base. So that means we have ammo, clothing, weapons, and other, which is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 308. Really, we need some 10mm. For armor, they have 17. They have some Vault Tech armor. Interesting. But that makes sense. They've clearly tortured someone from the vault. That makes sense.
"There was no way into the lockup, but I did manage to find some 308s for my rifle," said SosKaid, digging through the bag. Nothing for your laser pistol, unfortunately. And this armor that looks a bit like my vault suit. Maybe there really is a vault in Salem, said Hawthorne as SosKaid continued digging. But it's not on any of the Brotherhood charts. They both started walking towards the tree line, keen to get as far away from the drive-in as possible. I've made some notes for our records, said Hawthorne half to herself. There was Brotherhood tech in there. We need to come back and secure it. SosKaid didn't meet her gaze, and the two kept walking.
And other. I like other. There's probably some food in there too. And we're going to find iguana bits.
SosKaid, Hawthorne and Dogmeat walked a few meters into the tree line before crouching behind a fallen log to collect their thoughts and make a plan.
Okay, so then we said, okay, we got to follow Ramirez and the other raiders to stop them attacking Kesha. Probably they are only 3 or 4 hours ahead. It's now afternoon.
The increasingly overcast sky hid the sun's slow progress towards its daily resting place. A breeze had picked up and there was a slightly sticky quality to the air. SosKaid and Hawthorne sat on another low ancient grey log, elbows to knees, looked intently at the map spread out on the ground in front of them. Dogmeat chewed on their discarded iguana sticks with every sign of enjoyment. They'd walked for an hour or so at the edge of the forest in order to put some distance between them and the drive-in in case anyone else showed up. There was a smoky quality in the air in the distance behind them. We follow the road, back the way they went, turn south and continue along the trees until we get to Kesha, said SosKaid, chewing while she spoke, tracing the route with her outstretched finger. Said Hawthorne, still apparently a little shaken. We went that way a few weeks ago and were picking up rads along the road, so we cut through here. Hawthorne gently nudged SosKaid's finger out of the way and cut a line through the forest. This part here is completely burnt out and full of scorpions. Ramirez would have taken them through here, past that clearing, and out the other side. SosKaid nodded. Okay, we'll take Dogmeat's lead, but assume that's the path in case he loses the trail. SosKaid folded the map back up and tucked it away, absent-mindedly scratching at some of the newly dried blood on her suit.
SosKaid says, okay, we've got to go and track them with Dogmeat's help. And so I think, SosKaid asks about Ramirez. And she wants to know, is he a threat? I think it's likely. No. Okay.
Just one thing, said Hawthorne as SosKaid slung her backpack and hunting rifle over her shoulder. Caleb? SosKaid looked blank. Ramirez. He's not a bad guy. SosKaid raised an eyebrow. I mean, he has some questionable views and doesn't hide it well when he doesn't like someone, but he is loyal to the Brotherhood and he is a good soldier. He saved my life more than once. SosKaid gave her a skeptical look and went to mention the fact that he was willing to get a whole town of civilians murdered to save his own skin, but thought better of it. Okay, she said finally. I'll have to take your word for it. They took a few steps together back towards the road in silence. I mean, don't get me wrong, said Hawthorne finally. He is a massive arsehole. SosKaid chuckled.
He's just an arsehole. Some experience points. So I guess we get full experience for killing that one. That's going to be 17. I think we did a quest as well. Find out what happened to Scout. We did. That's going to be 10. That's 27. And new quest. Track them down before they get to Kesha.
The light was beginning to fade as the sun presumably dipped below the horizon behind them. SosKaid whistled quietly for the 100th time and pointed Dogmeat's snout towards one of the footprints in the dirt, reminding him of what they were doing here. He'd been in too good of a mood and was constantly bringing things for them to throw, losing track of his job. SosKaid sighed. Come on, boy, focus. I won't be able to see these soon. You have to lead the way. Dogmeat looked up at her, seemingly full of determination and understanding. He turned with purpose, picked up the stick again and dropped it in front of her, tail wagging proudly. Okay, that's it, SosKaid said, and frustratedly shoved the stick into her backpack.
It's going to be about a 2-day journey, so if they don't sleep, maybe they'll be able to catch up.
Can we rest a bit? Said Hawthorne. It was getting darker now, but a full moon was beginning to push its way through the clearing sky. There were the unsettling sounds of wasteland wilderness all around them. I don't feel so good.
Some items of food and drink are irradiated, contaminated with the radiation that is all pervasive in the wasteland. When you consume irradiated food, roll a dice. If you roll an effect, you suffer 1 radiation damage, which ignores any resistance from equipment or armor. Ah. Ouch. Radiation damage reduces a character's maximum health points. Wow. That's cool, though.
Okay, said SosKaid, not feeling like a basket of fruit herself. But just for a little bit. We have to push into the night if we're going to catch them or at least beat them there. The three retreated from the road to the tree line again, and SosKaid dug through her pack, locating a dusty plastic water bottle of purified water. Harder, she said to herself. This is the last of the pure stuff, so go easy on it. She handed the bottle to Hawthorne.
We're down to 1 purified water. We need more water. Okay. So I think that's the end of the scene. It's exciting. I can't wait to get to Kesha, hopefully save it, and then start modding some weapons. Dying to mod my hunting rifle and perhaps my cool duster trench coat with ballistic weave or something so we can give ourselves a bit more defense. Although we've been pretty healthy so far. Maybe it's been too easy. Maybe I have to make it harder. Not sure. We'll see. So.
Can you keep going? Said SosKaid, a hint of concern in her voice. Yeah, I'm fine, replied Hawthorne. Hopefully we can find some meds when we get to Kesha. Hawthorne nodded with effort and picked herself up from the forest floor. Back to the road, said SosKaid. I think we're making good time. If we hit the crossroad in the next hour or so, we can cut through the forest where you said. Hopefully Dogmeat agrees. SosKaid looked down. Dogmeat was curled up at her feet, snoring slightly. Come on, boy, she said softly. Gotta keep going.
We are about 3 hours behind them. We've now eaten. Our plan is to walk through the night, hoping that they will camp along the way and that we can catch up with them. So the first thing I want to ask is, are we able to find their trail with Dogmeat's help? Now, Dogmeat means we can reduce the difficulty by 1. Let's see what the weather's doing now, because that may have an impact. 9. The weather was overcast, and it is now cool and clear. Excellent.
They were both clearly tired now. Dogmeat had managed to stay on top of the trail, and they'd begun to cut through the forest. The progress was slower here, and neither of them had spoken a word in hours. It was very still. SosKaid was only half paying attention, barely keeping Dogmeat's wagging tail in the sickly green light of her Pip-Boy as they followed silently and slowly through the eerie toothpicks of trees. The moonlight was helping, though. According to her Pip-Boy, it was 10:36 p.m. If the raiders had made camp at nightfall, then they should only be an hour or 2 away, by her calculation. They stopped for a minute and shared the last sip of purified water without speaking. SosKaid returned the now empty bottle to her backpack and continued to trudge through the forest.
So, this is scene number 17. We were in control in the last scene. So that goes down to the chaos factor of 5, and it is now cool and clear, which means we have an advantage to perception roll. So I was going to maybe make it difficulty 2. It's -1 difficulty because it's cool and clear. And because we have Dogmeat, I think that means we're not going to have to worry at all about tracking them. Reduce the difficulty of all other perception tests by 1 to a minimum of 0. Excellent. So, we are able to follow the trail. Let's see. Let's write the expected scene. Track the raiders to their camp that night. Let's see if that, in fact, happens. Chaos factor of 5. We've got a 6, so yes, that is what happens.
Another hour passed with no change, until suddenly Dogmeat stopped and sunk a little lower to the ground, Snout leaving it for the first time in a while, sniffing the air in front of him. SosKaid stopped suddenly, and Hawthorne bumped into her gently from behind. SosKaid held up a hand, and they waited, straining their eyes and ears in the darkness. There was something up ahead.
So I think we travel for the rest of the day. We don't run into anything. We see the raiders sitting around a fire, camped out. So I'm going to just update that on the map. And sort of see where we are. So we're heading from Fall Creek. We're around the outside of the forest. And we're somewhere sort of in the middle of nowhere. I would say that it's still slightly foresty. Which means we can hide in the trees a little bit. Did they camp in the forest? I think it's 50-50. No, they didn't. So they camp in a clearing outside of the forest. We're skirting around the edge of the forest here.
They followed Dogmeat as he changed direction slightly to the west. He was moving low and slow. SosKaid had lost track of where they were on the map hours earlier and had been hoping that Dogmeat was tracking the right thing. Her doubts were immediately assuaged, however, when she heard a cackle float through the trees and the apparent hissing of a fire. It was them. She motioned to Hawthorne to get low and held a finger up for Dogmeat to stay put and let her take the lead. He obeyed. The three moved slowly and quietly towards the edge of the tree line, clear starry sky opening out before them. She checked the bolt on her gun and moved a bit closer.
They've lit a fire and they're all sitting around. There are 4 of them, including the raider boss, and I think probably just normal raiders. So we have normal raiders with pipe guns, road leathers, so on. Now we have the raider boss, who's level 10. This guy is scary.
SosKaid and Hawthorne settled in at the edge of the clearing. The raiders were milling around, grunting at each other and throwing the occasional glass bottle at the fire. The raider boss was there too.
So raider bosses tend to sit at the top of the hierarchy with the raider gang. They're usually equipped with better weapons and armor than their underlings and tend to be experienced combatants. They often earn their position through repeated displays of strength, leadership, and bloodshed to keep it in much the same way. He's going to have 30 hit points and 3 other raiders. And Ramirez, who hopefully will stand up and fight on our side. But we're not sure.
A hulking silhouette with his back to their position, moonlight glinting off the spiked shoulders of his armor. Hawthorne let out a pursed-lipped breath. "What's the plan?" she said in a whisper.
I think we're going to do our tried and tested. We're going to see if we can set up some frag mines on the edge of the forest. And then we're going to start sniping and see if we can get them to run into the mines. So we're going to see if we can sneak and set a couple of frag mines. I've got 2 of them. We're going to set both of them about 5 meters apart from the direction in which we're going to be shooting. And then I'm going to have Hawthorne be on the side. Okay, let's be smart about this.
"I still have 2 mines left," said SosKaid, thinking as she spoke. "If we can set them and draw the raiders in with gunfire, we might get lucky and take at least 1 out." Hawthorne nodded in the darkness. SosKaid continued, "But my rifle isn't going to be much good once they're in the trees." She thought for a moment more.
Because SosKaid has the hunting rifle, which is more powerful, and she wants to use that. So I think SosKaid is going to be on one side of the clearing, with the frag mine set up on the opposite side, and Hawthorne is going to take a shot at them from the trees and hopefully draw them that way before they run towards the explosives, and then SosKaid will maybe have a chance to shoot a couple while they're still in the clearing. Once they're in the forest, it's going to be more difficult to snipe them, so we have to hope that Hawthorne can maybe look after herself. Maybe that's too risky.
"If I can get over there and you can take the opening shot, I can get them in the back as they come towards you before flanking back around with my pistol." SosKaid saw Hawthorne stiffen. "I'll be here on my own?" She stuttered, a hint of panic in her voice.
Does Hawthorne go along with that plan? I think she trusts SosKaid because she rescued her, so I say it's likely she goes along with the plan. She does not go along with that plan.
I'm sorry, I can't do it," said Hawthorne meekly. "I trust you, but it's just too dangerous. I'm not trained for that kind of close combat." SosKaid pushed down her sudden sense of frustration. She wanted to say that as a Brotherhood member, Hawthorne literally was trained for that kind of close combat, much more than SosKaid was. But she held back and considered another option. "Okay, she said finally. How about this?
So she says, no, I'm not going to do that. I can't hold them off myself. And SosKaid says, okay, in that case, we're going to set the mines. I'm going to take a shot to distract them, run back a little bit, and we'll both get behind trees as cover. And as they run towards the mine, we'll shoot them as they come into the forest. That's the idea. So we're going to do a sneak test to see if we can hide the mines. So let's call it a difficulty 2 test. Do they have someone on patrol around the camp? Yes.
After a brief discussion, Hawthorne agreed to the new plan. They would stay closer together on this side of the clearing, get a shot in to draw them towards the mines, then retreat back and to the sides, ready with their pistols. You take this one, dig a shallow hole, making sure that it's hard packed at the bottom. This side goes up, and after it's in place, pull this lever here all the way around, after it is placed. I'm gonna... She paused as an argument seemed to be breaking out down by the fire.
What the fuck, Grobbo? That's my fucking drink!
One of the figures stood and arched his back dramatically, bottle held vertically to his lips, making exaggerated gulping sounds. There was a smash as the bottle was knocked out of the man's hand and a knife appeared at his neck.
We all know you don't have the balls, Skin, chuckled Grobbo.
An instant later, the leader had stood, clasped a massive hand around the knife holder's neck, and flung the man bodily to the ground, flat on his back. There was a gasping sound from the winded raider and a laugh from Grobbo, cut short by the metallic backhanded slap to his face.
Save it, said the leader calmly. You'll get your chance for blood tomorrow. Now pick your dick up and get out there and do a perimeter check.
Extreme yes, they have someone on patrol around the camp. So I think that means... Extreme yes, we're going to say 2 of them.
You too, Skinner.
The boss stepped over the prone figure and walked to the other side of the fire where a sitting man looked up for the first time.
Ramirez, said Hawthorne quietly. At least he looks okay.
We'll soon see which side he's on in any case, thought SosKaid as she slung the rifle over her shoulder and hefted the mine in one hand with her knife in the other. Hawthorne looked concerned.
The boss and one of the normal raiders and Ramirez are sitting around the fire getting it going, maybe starting to put together a bit of a cook station. And then 2 in a pair, 2 are patrolling the perimeter of the forest and are very alert. So that means it is going to be a difficulty 2 sneak test to see if we can plant the frag mines. Running low on action points. Let's use one. So we're going to need to hit agility and sneak, which is 12, and we need 2 successes. I wonder if she can assist me in this. She can try and lay one of them. So she needs to hit a 7, and I need to hit a 13. So... Oh, man.
Go, whispered SosKaid. Focused on the job and trusting that Hawthorne would carry out her part, she crept forward into the half-darkness, staying crouched low as she moved. She got about 5 meters out of the tree line and was painfully aware of her faint but definitely perceptible flickering shadow behind her. She lay flat on the ground as she heard a pause in the conversation. Fuck, she thought to herself.
1 success. Oh no, 2 successes. Thank you, agility. So I got 11 and a 6. But that means we are able to successfully plant the frag mines.
SosKaid lay flat on the cool earth, listening intently. The conversation continued.
As I said, they have a water operation, Ramirez was saying to the raider leader. A big one.
The raider was silently crouched in front of his prisoner, knife casually but not without latent threat in his hand. Ramirez continued in the ongoing silence.
Whoever controls it will have more than just water for themselves, but a powerful hold on the whole area, including Newark.
SosKaid turned the knife over in her hand and began to scratch into the hard ground, making a small bed for the mine to rest in. She looked over her shoulder and saw a shadowy shape slip back into the trees.
We'll see, soldier boy,
said the boss calmly, and then stood, casting a long shadow that stretched nearly all the way to SosKaid's position. He cracked his neck and gave his knife a little flick into the air, catching it by its point.
I'm sure I don't have to elaborate on your life expectancy if you're fucking with us,
he said dispassionately, and with snake-like speed, his knife suddenly protruded from between Ramirez's legs with a wooden sound. SosKaid saw her chance
and melted back into the trees.
So we're going to wait till they get to the opposite side of the clearing. SosKaid puts Hawthorne behind one of the trees and gets her to train her laser pistol at the entrance to the forest from the clearing. Let's see if she can get a clear shot from 2 zones away. Can she get a clear shot from 2 zones away? I think it's unlikely because we're in the forest. Let's see. 57. No, she can't. So she has to be a little closer than she'd like, which means actually her hunting rifle would be at a disadvantage, making it an extra difficulty to hit. And she's going to take a shot at the veteran. She can tell he's got the biggest armor and the biggest gear, so she wants to get a free shot on him. So we're going to roll. We are going to aim, which means we can re-roll one of the dice. We need to get 2 successes on agility small guns, which is happily a 14. 2 successes on a 14. I'm going to save my last action point. And she's going to take a shot.
SosKaid let out a slow breath, the cool evening air beginning to crystallize a long expanding cone in front of her. The trap was set. She turned to Hawthorne's shadowy shape barely visible behind a tree about 15 meters away. The barely perceptible silhouetted head bobbed slightly, and SosKaid took it as a confirmation. She took another deep breath, this time resting her left hand on the rough but crumbling bark of the arboreal skeleton in front of her, and propped the cool matte metal barrel of her hunting rifle on it. She slowly released her breath again, and thought she felt the nearby Hawthorne brace herself. At the zenith of her outbreath, she felt surprisingly calm, in control. She blinked once and pulled the trigger.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of A Wasteland Story. If you're interested in more solo role-playing antics, you can check out my other show, the Solo Roleplayers Podcast, where I do interviews with content creators, play a bunch of RPGs on mic, and a few other bits and pieces as well. You can search the Solo Roleplayers Podcast wherever you're listening to this, and if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email awastelandstorypodcast@gmail.com. Find me on Reddit or Blue Sky under PJ Sack, or better yet, head over to patreon.com/solo roleplayers, where you can join up as a free member and chat directly with me and the burgeoning solo RPG community we have growing over there. All the links are over in the show notes, as well as links and credits to all the fantastic music and sound effects used in this show. I hope that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, that you're rationing your water and not thinking too hard about the fact that there doesn't actually seem to be any iguanas in the wasteland. Until next time.